And welcome. Raise Your Inner Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So how is your mental game this week? How are you doing? Hope things are well. You had a nice 4th of July if you're in the States. Things are good here in the summer groove. Peter was taking a class over the summer home from college, physics. It was a lot of work, double paced because the full course in half the time. Put in a lot of hours. But he finished yesterday, did well. Super nice to have that behind him for all of us. So his full summer chill mode officially starts today. Pretty excited about that. Been pretty wet. Hard to fit outdoor things in between the rainy days. I mean, not super bad, not flooding. Just a wet, humid summer so far. A little worried about fireworks tonight. I'm recording this on Thursday. Forecast is not great for fireworks. I'm not sure we've ever had one canceled, but it looked like we might tonight. I'm not sure if they're allowed to do that during a storm. Anyway, we'll see about that. I got the new heavy-duty chalk for our pickleball court and the new unit that holds 2 pieces of chalk. We talked about that last week. Works great. Chalked in new lines. Rain came through. No different. Totally washed away. I don't know how that was heavier-duty chalk. Disappointed about that. But Margaret had an idea to put down small paint marks at all the corners so I can just chalk in new lines every time I want to play. That was genius. Put those down yesterday. Very optimistic that will end up doing the trick. Just takes a couple of minutes to run the lines if you don't have to measure and all that. So just waiting for a dry day. So our nice little summer continues on. Plenty to talk about today. A couple of nice happenings at home and work. Then things get real. We'll talk about the shocking decisions coming out of the Supreme Court this week. The also shocking presidential debate and all the issues around that. A gratitude exercise as a counter to that stress. We'll talk some personal finance this week, having a good financial advisor. We have a 2-pronged challenge of the week and some fun recommendations. We're talking Led Zeppelin and the Beatles this week. And not dating myself at all with those, of course. All right, ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things were pulling me down? In the ups category, pickleball again, before the chalk lines got washed away, we had our first use of the new court, our maiden voyage. Had a bunch of family over one night, put up the new net, went out there, played some great games, had a great time. Peter played for the first time, partnered with a friend of his. Joe and I played against them. Everything worked great. It's a perfectly good court. It was fun to have Peter play. Again, he'd never played before. He enjoyed that, wants to do more. Margaret's never even seen the game. She was excited about the whole thing. It was just a great success all around. Besides being fun on its own, it also validated the whole idea. So a big happy lift around that for me. Now we just need a good system for those lines and some dry days. But that was super fun. With the Sports Academy, I got more great reports from our latest graduate this week. Got a new video, got a before and after assessment scores from her. They're both great, super helpful for marketing, of course, but also just feels great to hear the differences made for her. You can imagine. That's just lovely. Also got word 2 more adult rec students will be sharing quotes that we can use. So that all just feels really nice. Just good lift there. On the downside, this was a tough week. I'll say more in the top story section, but between the debate and the Supreme Court decisions, the downs had way more power than the ups for me this week, for sure. There's something about bad Supreme Court decisions that are especially heartbreaking. I think it's because they're final, right? There's no appealing those. They immediately become the law of the land, and it is really hard, if not impossible, to do anything about them. And they're so destructive. In so many ways, it's hard to get your head around that they could have those opinions in the first place. They just don't make sense, that they would not understand or care about the damage they're doing. And then to think about what it'll take to undo that damage. It's just heartbreaking and depressing. I've actually been keeping this to myself a bit in conversation because I don't want to spread that heartbreak, honestly. And there's nothing you can do right now, right? The decisions are final. It's just bad in every possible way. It's a gut punch. Beating Trump is still critical with this. It's the best thing we can do. Gives us a chance to put things back on the right track. I don't even want to think about what happens if he wins, given these rulings. But any real change will still likely take years. So that's a real bummer. I mean, I just can't see it any other way. Something truly bad and dangerous has happened in our country. Real damage has been done by our own highest court. It's just mind-boggling. Sorry, I can't find a way to make that sound happier, but I really can't. I'm just sort of in mourning about it, honestly. And that's, of course, a real downward pull, weighing everything down. Oof, tough week. I'm sure you're feeling the same. Anyway, pickleball, nice quotes. Supreme Court. My ups and downs this week. Next up, top stories. The big one this week has to be the debate. Speaking of a down, and speaking of a gut punch, Jesus, that was so bad. I didn't watch it. I think I mentioned last week that I wouldn't, at least not the whole thing. I did end up watching the last 15 minutes or so with the sound off, and that told me everything I needed to know. It was just shocking how bad Biden was. Just visually, it was obvious. I've been a big supporter all along. You've heard me say that here, just last week even. I think he's done a great job as president, more than he gets credit for. I was absolutely confident he could win again after that State of the Union speech, especially, and that he would win again when we got down to it. But all of that got wiped away with that horrible debate. For a bit afterwards, I thought maybe it wasn't that bad. I hadn't seen or heard any of the earlier segments, but as the comments started rolling in, confirming my impressions, it got worse and worse. And it wasn't just that he seemed old and tired, though he totally did, way worse than anything I imagined. It was that he completely missed every opportunity to take the fight to Trump. And there were a ton of opportunities. Trump was terrible, outrageous, lying constantly. A better debater could have ruined him. But Biden missed it by a mile. His one job, as others have said, was to put to rest the questions about his age and capacity and put the focus back on Trump and the choice in this election. Not only did he not do that, he made it worse on every point. So, of course, the question is blown up, should he get out? I've heard hours of commentary and analysis on this. I think I understand the arguments on both sides. I get how complicated and uncertain it is. It could definitely blow up. But I have to say, I am now firmly in the camp that he has to step down. I just don't see any other way. I don't believe he can do what needs to be done. There are two jobs at stake. One is being president. Again, I think he's been a great one, but I'm nowhere near confident he can be again. He's clearly lost a lot of capacity in the last 4 years, and that type of loss tends to only accelerate at that age. But right now, the bigger job is the campaign, getting elected. He has to do the work to beat Trump. It's a massive job. Everything depends on that. Like literally, the fate of the world in many ways depends on it. And I simply no longer believe he can do it. 4 years ago, he did, but times are different. That was COVID. He didn't do nearly as much physical campaigning as normal, and he was a lot sharper and more energetic back then. I don't think he can do it this time. On the flip side, when I imagine the excitement and the energy of having a new nominee, the historic nature of that, all the anti-Trump energy freed up because the Biden worries are gone, I just think the excitement will carry the day. That could be super naive. I'm sure it would actually be incredibly messy and potentially ugly. And again, it might not work at all. But staying the course also stands a good chance of not working, especially now. So I still think it's the right path. Also, on another level, just for him and his legacy, stepping aside at this point would be one of the most heroic and historic things any president has ever done. He would be a double hero. He beat Trump the first time, saved us from that, put the country back on a good path, Ukraine, the economy, climate, did so much great work. To voluntarily step aside now to help beat Trump again would just be heroic. Now, the argument against is, if he is actually the only one who can beat Trump, he steps aside, we lose. Obviously, that's a tragic mistake. So I'm not saying I'm sure what's the best. No one can know that. But I think we all saw that night that he is simply not capable of doing what needs to be done. He has to step down for the good of the country. That's what it looks like to me right now. Honestly, my biggest fear right now is that he won't. He'll stay in. And it sort of makes me mad to hear him and all the supporters say that. I'm in, I'm fighting, we're going to win this thing. I get it strategically, but it just feels delusional and dangerous and sort of gaslighting to me. It reminds me, in a twisted way, of the famous Black Knight scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He's fighting the king. He gets his arms and legs cut off. He's got blood shooting out everywhere. Everyone sees it, but he's still talking like he's going to kick the king's ass. It was just a flesh wound. Come here, you coward. I'm invincible. Sort of feels like that to me. Delusional and even a bit selfish. Now, again, I could be wrong. I know so little of the actual reality, I guess, as we all do. But given everything I've seen and heard, that's where I am right now. If he stays in, I'm still going to work to get him elected. Of course, we all will. We have to. But right now, I'm much more excited about our chances with someone new and younger who can take it to Trump the way it needs to be done. And I'm much more fearful about not doing that. So that's the big story for me, the debate from hell. Last week, I said, let them know, vote for Joe. This week, I'm saying, please, seriously, I'm begging you, please step aside. Let us pick someone who can do this thing and finish what you started. All right, that's top stories. There's actually a ton to say about the specific court decisions too, but I'm just going to leave that for another day. Enough bad news for one day, my goodness. All right, next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about the idea from my book and the Sports Academy training, be the CEO of your inner company. So you listen to the perspectives of your lower levels, your emotions, your worries, your impulses, but ultimately you decide what you think and say and do from one moment to the next. That's super powerful. This week, in part to help with the gut punch of the week we all had, I want to revisit one of my favorite tools to feel better in a stressful, fearful moment, which is our old friend, the gratitude exercise. I've used this just this week in a very direct way to snap out of my panicky feelings about all this. And it's kind of funny. I'm in my stressed out state, and a pretty good one, and it occurs to me in that moment as I'm heading off to sleep to do a gratitude exercise, and part of me actually resists that. I don't want to feel gratitude right now. What's there to be thankful for? This is a nightmare. This is a disaster for our country, and on and on. So my big brain was actually trying to talk me out of doing something that would make me feel better. So classic. Fortunately, I was able to say, okay, no, yes, it's a disaster, but it doesn't help anything for me to be in freak out mode right now. So let's do this anyway. And by the way, that is textbook, be the CEO of your inner company, right? I'm hearing all this stuff from my big brain and my fear, and I say, nope, I hear you, but we're not going there. We're going to do this instead. Anyway, gratitude exercise. We've talked about 3 different versions at different times. There's the one from Sam Harris. Imagine something truly terrible has happened in your life, something like if it happened that you would give anything to get back to the way things were before, and then realize that your life right now is that place. And then just put all that love and joy and appreciation and gratitude you would feel in that situation onto the life you actually have right now. I love that. There's my version where I imagine I've just regained some basic physical capacities after having lost them for a while, like from an injury, so I can sit up on my own, I can see out of both eyes, I can grab things with my hand, just basic things like that. And then just feel all that gratitude for those basic things we take for granted. That's a nice one. Also, just a small one I do most nights. Before falling asleep, I look back through my day. What went well today? What do I feel good about? That's also super helpful. And I think for getting good sleep too, actually, to have that be the last thing I think about rather than something I'm worried about. Anyway, gratitude exercises. Remarkably powerful tools for all kinds of situations. They can help break out of a negative, worried, fearful state. And of course, they help you feel grateful, which is a lovely feeling in itself. For more mental game goodness, check out the Raise Your Inner Game book. If you haven't read that, there's a link here. If you play sports, check out the Sports Academy training. Perfect for that. Either way, this is a very helpful piece of inner game gold, a gratitude exercise. All right, next up, raise your outer game. Last week, we talked about my No News Till 9 project. It was just me breaking my bad habit of checking the news constantly throughout the day, not allowed to check anything until after 9 at night. I'm happy to say I'm still on that, and it's going great. Still hard sometimes, especially when you know there are important things happening, but it's also still true that there's never been something that couldn't wait until the evening to hear about. And it's definitely been a positive to get that habit under control and not be doom scrolling and stress triggering all day. This week I want to touch on a different outer game topic, which is money, personal finances. We had a meeting with our financial advisor this week. I never look forward to those, though she's super nice and really good. It's not that. I just don't like talking about finance stuff. I don't really get it. It's uncomfortable. It's confusing. I just don't like it. But man, oh man, is it helpful if you have the right financial advisor. We've had a couple of different people in the past, and they were not great. Again, nice, fine, but we never got it. We come out of the meeting and say, what did he say? And that is not what you want. That does not give you the confidence and peace of mind you want about your finances. But now we pretty much always get it, and it feels great, and it's super helpful. Helpful to have the feeling that you're on top of things, that you understand what's happening. That's a great relief. And helpful just on the bottom line. You know, the service feels just in general expensive to me, just on its face, the cost of it. But she consistently comes up with ideas that save us even more, and like a lot more in some cases, things we would never have thought of. So it's more than worth it on that level. But it goes beyond that too. With Peter in college now, she's met with him, helping him sort through his situation and thinking about smart choices going forward. It's just been great. So the message is, get a good financial advisor. Just do it. Figure out a way. I don't think I'm allowed to say who ours is specifically. I think that would be sort of weird, maybe. I can say they're part of a Ameriprise. I'll put a link in the notes. And of course, I don't know if all their advisors are the same. I have to assume they're not. But one way or another, I'm sure you can find one and that you'll be super happy when you do. I will say this. Work with a company you can trust. You don't want to put your money at risk, of course. Make sure they're a fiduciary. That's super important so you can trust their recommendations. And make sure you can understand what they're saying. That's made such a difference for us. If you meet with someone and you come out of there thinking, what did they say? Just keep looking. You want someone who can explain things in a way that you can understand. Full stop. So that's your outer game for this week. Get yourself a good financial advisor. If you're anything like us, you'll be very glad you did. All right, next up, our challenge of the week. So this week, we have to do the gratitude exercise. Any one I mentioned is fine, or any other version you prefer, but it really is a great help to get yourself back out of a tough place emotionally. If you're up for 2 challenges, I'd also suggest the thing I talked about a couple of weeks ago, just talking yourself out of your anxiety. And I mention that because I just did it myself again this morning. I was super stressed about everything we talked about the real fear that something truly bad is coming. But again, as always, it doesn't help to be in that state, no matter what. You're never effective when you're altered like that. So I reminded myself of that. I said, okay, could be true, but it's not right now. In this moment, it's a potential in the future. No reason to let what might happen in the future keep me from being where I want to be right now. And it worked. I snapped right back out of it. We need all the mental game tools we can get in these crazy times, and we need them right there, handy and ready. So try a gratitude exercise for sure this week. If you want to also practice talking yourself down, why not? The more mental game mastery, the better. All right, that's the challenge this week. Next up, highly recommended. This week, a few things. First, a book. And I'm not far enough into it yet to fully recommend it, though I've read, I think, every other book in this long series, so it's a good bet, and it's starting well. But anyway, the book is The New Girl by Daniel Silva. It's a Gabriel Allon book. That's the series. They're generally excellent books. Started out as spy thrillers, basically. Allon worked for Israel's Mossad agency. I love those kind of books in general. But he's also a leading art expert and restorer, and so Silva, in the later books, has been able to take that same kind of thriller energy into various art world stories. They're just very interesting, page-turners, just really well done. Highly recommended, any of them. You might want to start at the beginning of the series, but I'm sure you could pick up any of them and enjoy it. Some music. This is sort of funny, I guess, but I listened to some Led Zeppelin this past week and was just reminded again how much I love that. Oh my goodness, especially their fourth album, Led Zeppelin IV. It's just so intense and ferocious. I love the energy, the raw power. Of course, it has some history for me too. I was around when they first came out. I have memories of that. I was in a band later, my main road band, out of high school back in the late 70s with a guy who was famous for being able to do a perfect Robert Plant. It was spooky. We had a full set of Led Zeppelin in that band that was amazing. So I played a lot of it. I actually played keyboard bass on a lot of it too, so I'm familiar with it at that sort of a granular level. But still, it just kills me. It lifts me right up. In fact, I've decided to listen to this as my pre-competition playlist to get me into the right mindset I want for the game. Ferocious. Anyway, Led Zeppelin IV. Highly recommended. Also, the Beatles. Last night I was trying to remember the song a particular lyric came from. I had it stuck in my head, but I couldn't place it. That brought me to their Revolver album. And again, I was reminded that album is just mind-blowing and I think generally underappreciated. Here's one aspect you wouldn't know like anything about if you weren't into recording. But this is when the Beatles started to experiment in the studio, coming up with new sounds, doing creative things, using the studio and the gear in a sense as its own instrument. There are several things they did on this record against Revolver. I was reading, I think it said 9 specific techniques that had never been done before, but that are super common ever since. I've done most of them myself on my records. They invented all these interesting studio techniques that had literally never been done before. It just blows my mind. George Harrison started his heavy Eastern influence during this time. There are amazing sitar tracks on there, just so interesting and fresh. They started experimenting with tape loops and recording things backwards. I believe the very first backwards guitar solo is on that record. There's a particular speaker cabinet called a Leslie speaker that was designed for Hammond organs. It had speakers that would rotate, spin around to give the organ a spacious kind of stereo chorusy sound. The Beatles ran a vocal mic through a Leslie cabinet, got this weird sort of fuzzy underwater sound out of that, recorded that. No one had ever done that before. So just over and over again, fresh, new, inventive things. Now, of course, the songs are all great, right? Classic Beatles songs, well written, well played. That goes without saying. Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, Good Day Sunshine, just great songs throughout. But the production was also just revolutionary. So that was really fun to dig into that again. The Beatles, Revolver. A movie, I watched Hitman on Netflix. I'd heard a lot about it. Rotten Tomatoes had it at 95%. I've seen a bunch of articles about the lead actor in that. I don't remember his name. I liked it fine. I think that score might be a little high for me anyway. I mean, it was fun. I didn't see everything coming, but it was also a little on the light side, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that, of course. You know, it was good enough. Easy to recommend, maybe just not highly recommended. Okay, reminder again, check out the Raise Your Inner Game book for more mental game goodness, or the Sports Academy training to take your game to a higher level. Links to everything in this week's notes. Otherwise, that's it for this week. I hope you have a great week. Keep up the good work. I will talk to you next time.